What's up, comic and pop culture fans? This is James with Mint Hunter Comics, and I've recently started getting a mini early Marvel hero key wall, starting with the first Hawkeye, first Daredevil, first Black Widow, and first Silver Cap, all notably 1964 keys. But I've left one more spot in this little Marvel nook I've got for one more key, and I'm saving and trading and hunting for a big one. Sticking with the theme, I wanted to get a major, low, maybe even poor grade copy of either the first appearance of Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Ant-Man, or hell, perhaps even Spidey. Already knowing these were some pretty lofty goals, I think my ambition may have been put on pause when I was looking up some prices or even just the lowest of the low grades. Compared to these 1964 first appearance characters that I already owned, these 1962 and 63 first appearances were about 10 to 20 times the price of a 64 book. So immediately I wanted to start doing some digging. Is the main factor driving these prices simply that these mega characters are just the best of the best and the demand is at a constant all-time high? Or is there perhaps a little bit more that drives these prices? Turns out there are a few factors in why books from 1961 through 63 are considerably tougher to find than 1964. Let's go back in time to look at what was going on with the comic book market in 1961. This brings us to our first factor, the great price increase of 1961. Since the dawn of comic books, pretty much everything had always been priced at a dime, 10 cents. If you had a dime in the 40s, it bought you a 68-page magazine. In 1944, that dime bought you 60 pages. In 1950, 52 pages. And by the time the Silver Age started, comics were down to 36 pages, but still going for that dime. But here's the problem. Clearly 10 cents wasn't manageable forever. So who was the first to jump? Who made that first price increase? None other than Dell Comics, Disney characters and such. While all other publishers didn't increase pricing until the end of '61, Dell charged ahead and went immediately to 15 cents. Their sales were decimated, and eventually they had to retreat not back to 10 cents, but to 12 cents. DC played it safe and had numerous comics for months warning readers that 12 cents was coming, even saying still only 10 cents on the covers, implying an increase was soon to come. By the end of '61, all publishers had repriced new comics at the new standard of 12 cents. 12 cents from 10 cents? That doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, historically speaking, any price, no matter how big or small, does make an impact. I know when comics went from $2.99 to somehow hopping straight to $3.99, I was turned off and canceled a lot of my pre-orders. Which is cute now when you see most comics are a full $5. But in 1961, this 2-cent price increase must have been enough to sway parents from allowing their kids to buy these things. Perhaps a dime was always an acceptable budget, and once it got over, it was just not deemed worth it. Regardless, the changes were felt immediately. Check out this letter from DC, encouraging and thanking fans for buying the book despite the price change and encouraging them to continue to be fans. Of the 36 titles reporting sales in '61 and '62, only a few reported actual sale increases. Notably, Justice League of America and Archie Comics. Everything else suffered. World's Finest sunk 12.5%. It's hard to believe, but even Batman sunk 15.5%, and Detective Comics was worse at 18.5%. Mystery in Space, House of Mystery, and My Greatest Adventure all got hammered below a 20% drop in sales. More newer established Silver Age heroes did a bit better, but still saw losses. Flash went down 11%, and Green Lantern went down seemingly the lowest out of all the male superheroes at only a 5.9% dip. I say male because an interesting phenomenon happened during this time in that Lois Lane and Wonder Woman didn't suffer nearly as much as these other boys, indicating that perhaps young girl readers were less swayed by the price increase than the boys. Now, I started this video talking about Marvel, so we have to bring up Marvel. For the most part, a lot of the major Marvel characters that we know today were created by Stan Lee after the 12% increase. Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Daredevil, etc. The only one that comes to mind that wasn't affected by the 12-cent price increase was Ant-Man, which was brought on, like these others, in 1962, but interestingly, it still held the 10-cent cover. But this is a bit of an outlier. However, it does contribute to Ant-Man being one of the more affordable and findable than some of those other 12-cent first apps. The already ongoing Marvel titles that turned 12 cents from 10 cents felt the worst dips in the industry as a whole. Tales to Astonish lost 25% of its sales base, and Tales of Suspense went down 31%. Ouch. Now remember Tales of Suspense, because we're going to come back to that. Okay, so now it's 1962, all comics are 12 cents, and everybody but Lois Lane, Archie, Wonder Woman, and Justice League of America are suffering. Did it ever recover? Did it ever get back on track? Absolutely, but not really until 64. The initial hit of this price increase, while for some books was a drastic loss, took only a year or so to recover, mainly thanks to a certain popular comic writer named Stan Lee. Ever heard of him? Well, Stan Lee's new characters, Hulk, Spider-Man, Thor, were so popular that it sort of jump-started the market by the end of 63. Still though, some characters were still found in that awkward transition phase before sales once again increased. This brings us back to Tales of Suspense, specifically Mega Key issue number 39, the first appearance of Iron Man. Tales of Suspense books were still having a hard time in 63, thus less copies were bought of the first appearance of Iron Man versus, let's say, Amazing Spider-Man number 1, both in 1963. In 1964, sales were back up and quite strong. 1964 introduced such notable characters such as Daredevil, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Teen Titans, Zatanna, the return of Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and a handful of iconic villains such as Mysterio, Electro, Green Goblin, Kraven, Dormammu, and many more. Sadly, the main publisher at the time, DC, didn't report sales data, so it's tough to gauge how much of an increase DC felt in 1964, but it was clear that at least Marvel was back on track. Okay, so less people were buying comics due to the price increase from the end of 61, specifically 62, and it seems everyone finally got over it by 64. But what other factors contribute to these 1962 books being harder to find? How about the survival rate? Remember that all comics from this era were newsstands, sold in supermarkets, street corners, 7-Elevens. They were designed to be read and thrown away. And sadly, that is what happened to many of these comics. Either that, or the actual remaining copies we still find today typically have been loved to death and show significant wear and aging. Specifically for Marvel, the late 50s to 64 also had a phenomenon known as Marvel chipping. What's Marvel chipping? Marvel chipping is a binary defect. That means the trimming/cutting defect that results in a series of chips and tears at the top, bottom, and most importantly, the right edges of the cover, caused when the cutting blade of an industrial paper trimmer becomes dull. The flaw bears the name Marvel chipping because it's most frequently seen on Silver Age Marvel books. Some comic grading experts also blame the poor paper quality. So now we've got these newsstands coming out on crap paper that are being cut sloppily, that are designed to be read and thrown away, of course the survival rate is going to be rough. In 1964, Marvel chipping appears to be much less prevalent. Sales too were significantly higher, and yes, people still read and threw them away, but you are simply much more able to find these in comparison to these books from just a couple years earlier. And finally, we really should talk and circle back to the most obvious factor, and it's that Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, and Hulk are all massively popular characters, constantly being driven up by demand. Yes, Hawkeye is a popular character, but against the popularity of Spider-Man, forget about it. Even if you removed some of these other factors that make collecting this era hard, you'd still be left with the fact that these books are immensely popular, and that if you want one, you have to settle for the lowest of the low grades, perhaps even coverless issues. And still, you'd find yourself spending so much it'll make you blush. So if I'm trying to save a spot for a major Marvel low-grade first appearance, I've got some significant saving to do, because that's an especially difficult pocket of time to try to collect. The low survival rate, the crappy page quality, the lower sales, the high demand, it all contributes to making these books specifically a real challenge. And it's a challenge I accept, but I realize that I'll need to be patient for it. These are special books, and the prices are the way they are for a reason. Hope you guys enjoyed, and keep on hunting, my friends.